Alleluia, Christ is risen. He is risen indeed. Alleluia. Please be seated. Some of you may have listened last week to the BBC Radio 4 programme on the faith of the actor and comedian Kenneth Williams. If you know who I'm talking about, basically if you're old enough, you'll instantly picture him, probably in a Carry-On film, such as Carry-On Cleo, where he played Caesar. You'll remember the scene where he comes back from conquering to his annoyed wife, Calpurnia, played by Joan Sims, and tries to please her by offering her gifts he's brought back from his latest expeditions. "Look, dear," he says, "I've brought you cheeses from Holland." "I've got Dutch cheeses," she says. "I've brought you onions from Spain." "I've got Spanish onions," she shouts. "And I've brought you precious stones from Gaul." "I've got gallstones and all," she screams. We later find Williams running down the imperial corridors from the fateful dagger, crying, and I know you know it, "Infamy, infamy, they've all got it in for me." Well, the real Julius Caesar would have been very puzzled by today. Any talk of resurrection would not have been a joyful thing to a Roman. It would have been terrifyingly unnatural. The boundaries between the living and the realm of the dead had to be preserved. If you heard someone had risen from the dead, your first question might have been then, how can we get him back into his grave? The problem was that when the dead did appear in a dream or a vision in the ancient world, it was often to denounce their killers, and the ancient empires specialized in mass slaughter. So, to be told that God's firstborn from the dead was one of those victims of the empire's legal system would have been unthinkable. In that world, human lives were expendable and unimportant. Those who fell victim to the system, well, they just disappeared. But what if they didn't? Here was a message by our ancestors in Christian faith that an executed criminal, instead of disappearing into oblivion, is brought back into the world, and his friends are told to speak to his killers, telling them that for their life and health, they must trust that he has made peace for them with God. The Christians were saying that death does not end relationships between human persons or between us and God. And of course, we forget so readily. One of the things that Christianity brought into this world, we're so used to it that we think it's obvious. But theirs was a world in which human life was not precious. Fathers had the right to kill their children in certain circumstances, masters their slaves. Crowds flocked to see prisoners of war killing each other in theaters. And the Christian faith was now preaching that human value could not be extinguished by violence or death. No one could be forgotten. All life was a gift. All were precious to the life-loving God of resurrection. Now, this means in our own day, we are to live and stand up for, as they did at great cost, even to their lives, this non-negotiable belief in humanity. All are loved, all are valued, all are God's children. So if today some world leaders say that there are the best and then there are the rest, if influential people with high self-esteem but low self-awareness work hard to make some human beings disappear off the radar, if they do all they can to make themselves and their friends richer when the vulnerable are made poorer, if they talk as if dignity is something you can uphold in some and undo in others, then we, Christians, will be there with protest and purpose in the name of the Christ who, with wounds still in his hands that stretched out towards all the world, all, says, I am alive so that you can live. You may not be interested in politics, but as we're seeing, politics is interested in you. Our belief in a God of resurrection comes as judgment and liberation and has very political consequences. It means we have to be visible and vocal for each other, and especially take our place alongside those who suffer hate, discrimination, scapegoating, and who are forced to live down to low expectation. God wills resurrection for all of us, and God's gift of renewed life must start in the here and the now. Southwark Cathedral has a long history rooted in this belief of holding out the hand to lift people up out of fearful, life-stifling situations, so often forced on them by some majority and often the church. God forgive us. People, because of their gender, or because of their race, or their faith, or their sexuality, or their background, or their being part of the trans community, or their financial status, or their mental health, the list goes on. And our vocation is to help establish justice for each of God's people, because we believe that God cherishes all the lives of the living and the departed, including those whose lives have been hated or wasted or cut short or oppressed, just like that of his own Son. You see, in the resurrection appearances, Jesus does not appear in great glory and hype like some divine dancer on Strictly, coming down some heavenly staircase with dry eyes. He doesn't come to dazzle us. He comes to open our eyes. He appears to his disciples in the places he was first with them, the places he'd spent time with them, the seashore, a garden, an upper room, breaking bread, and says in effect, it was here we were first together. It was here you denied me and left me. But it's here that I'm with you again. It's okay. Our translation says that when he saw the disciples, he said, "Peace be with you," as if he was a rather good Anglican. What he actually said was, "Shalom," which in their day-to-day greetings simply meant, "Hi, hello. Yes, we're back together as we were." He was saying, you can rest and live in my faithfulness. Have a future in my fidelity, my love for you. Let's start again where we began. Believing that you are lovable enough for someone to say this isn't always easy. But in that shalom, we can smile and even laugh out loud that we and all are loved, and that we must run and tell people that they are loved too, especially if they are scarred or scared. I want to end by reminding us that when the death squads did their rounds in South America a few years ago now, murdering people they wanted out of the way, the local village churches would gather on Sundays, and in their worship they would read the names out of those who had been killed that week. As each name was read out, someone in the congregation would stand up and shout, "Presente," here, present. The killers had thought they'd got rid of the men, women, children, but no. They were present here in the church, the communion of God, in which death itself dies. Those Christians believed in the communion of saints, that is, the communion of all God's people, alive and dead. They worshipped with angels and archangels and all the company of heaven. They are presente because Jesus Christ is presente. And in those poor, besieged, frightened communities, this was a resilient, passionate, urgent proclamation of Christian belief in the sacredness of each unique, individual life, bearing within it the image of God himself. If someone makes life cheap, you don't counter it by imitation, but by strength of resolve in its dignity. Christ is presente. So also are his people present with him. And it is our duty in this life, when someone is forced out of the picture by anyone, great or small, that we stand and cry in the name of the living God, presente. They are here, and they are with us. Mary was so honest when she said, "They've taken away my Lord." She didn't yet see that the very opposite was true. He was there. He is here, now, always, and lovingly holding us no matter what the world will say or what it will do. He will never be put back into his grave, no matter what Caesar may want, for he is risen. Presente.